Well, good morning. My name is Bob Opple, O-P-P-L-E, and I'm a crew member on this old beautiful lady, the Razorback. I served on her from 1959 to 1963, and she was my home. Now, when you look at the Razorback to begin with, the keel was laid in the 1943 era. She went in the Second World War in 1942. She literally kicked behind over there. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the United States Submarine Service destroyed close to 75% of all the Japanese merchant marines. But they did so at a tremendous loss, and they lost close to 30% in the start of the war, and at the end of the war, close to 25% of all their ships sunk, over 4,000 men. So it was a tremendous loss, but they did help shorten the war. The U.S.S. Razorback, as you're looking at her right now, had several configurations. We started out in the World War II configuration, which was known as a fleet boat. At that particular time, they had guns on the top side. She had to surface at that particular time to charge her batteries. This is a diesel-electric boat, which means that we had to operate under the water on electricity, but every night we had to surface to charge the submarines. After the World War II, we stole an invention from the Japanese called a snorkel. And everybody's familiar with a snorkel because if you've gone swimming, you've used one. But basically what that allowed us to do is to operate and charge our batteries under the water. So we could get within 60 feet of the surface, raise a large tube up, suck air and run our engines and perform normal duties. And as such, we have been on this boat at extremely long periods of time under the water, and the longest I can remember when I was on here staying under the water on the snorkel was 89 days, and that's a long time under the water without a shower, ladies. When I got on her in 1959, she was what I call a half sail, or the Guppy II conversion. At this particular time, she had a snorkel on it, a half sail, and if you're looking at her right now, she's what we call the northern sail. As the Navy continued to develop electronics, gear, they needed a place to store them, and they stored them in the sail up here. Again, these boats were very active, very active in the Cold War, and we spent a lot of our time operating in places that we shouldn't have been. And so, other than that, let's go on board this beautiful old lady, and we'll start the tour. Submarines were really surface ships that were designed to submerge. We had to surface every night to charge our batteries, but we did so, and if you look at this deck, the deck itself floods. Underneath this deck, we'll have hydraulic controls, we'll have a lot of air lines, we'll have a lot of electrical lines. These decks will raise up and we can work on them. So there's a lot of mechanism, but all of these decks raise up and all of these decks flood. This gets us down very fast. All around the outside of this submarine, we have what we call ballast tanks. So you have fuel tanks and ballast tanks. To submerge, it's a very simple process. You just let the air out, let the water in. Once you become heavier or have past negative buoyancy, you submerge with the submarine. To surface, all we used is high pressure air. We had banks and banks of air tanks which are underneath this main surface, and all we did was we blow the water out and we'd come to the surface. Very simple, as long as you had power, as long as you had air. One of the things that you're looking at here, if you look, a submarine is designed to operate under the water. Now the new submarines seldom surface. We would surface occasionally, but if we had to work on the outside of the submarine, you'll notice a rail that goes along the boat, the top of the decking here. This rail, we would clamp a clamp to it, put a safety line on, and regardless of the weather, we could get up here and operate topside.
Okay.
We didn't lose anybody in our submarine. We had a full contingency of torpedoes on this submarine. We had firing from both the bow and the stern. We had 6 torpedo tubes forward. We had 4 torpedo tubes aft. We loaded them. We're going to show you one of the torpedoes, but they were loaded through a main loading hatch. They were manually loaded. And when you're dealing with a unit that weighs over 2 tons, it takes a lot of work and a lot to jockey it inside the submarine and get them in position. But we'll show you more of the torpedoes when we get inside the boat. How you doing, guys?
We're doing good, Bobby.
Here you'll see one of the skids on this torpedo. Basically what they would do is jockey the torpedo around, put them on a sling, open this hatch here, and then position them inside, and through a series of chain locks and dollies they would position the torpedoes inside the submarine. Sometimes this was done at sea. Seldom, but in an emergency in Second World War, they would pull next to a tender and you could load submarines or torpedoes at sea. I want to point out as we go into the submarines, you're going to miss one of the more exciting things of living and working on a diesel-electric submarine, and that is the smell. They smell like diesel oil. This submarine has not had the engines running now for about 14 years, but she still has that permeating smell of diesel oil, which all of us submariners like. Not only did the boat smell, but we stunk. We had no showers on board these things, so we go at sea many times for an excess of a month or 2 months, and it's kind of an interesting, but our philosophy was, if the whole crew smelt the same, that was acceptable. In the after torpedo room, we're going to take this tour a little bit backwards today, but as you can see in here, it's very, very confined. We would sleep people down here. You'll notice that we did sleep right on top of the torpedoes themselves. We didn't have a lot of bunks back here. We had maybe 9 bunks, but the bunks were on top of, underneath, beside the torpedo. The main objectives for us was to deliver a warhead in the side of an enemy ship. We had 4 torpedo tubes in the aft of this submarine. We had 6 in the forward part of the submarine. These boys, when we would go to sea, she would be loaded, cocked, and ready to go. If you'll notice on the war shots on the torpedoes themselves, we would put signs up that said loaded war shots. These guys were very, very good. They could fire these torpedoes and reload them within about 2 minutes. So they were all manually loaded. Today they're a lot faster. So you'll see how cramped it is in here. You'll notice that we do have pull-out beds. And excuse us because we do have a work party on right now, and we're working to get this so beautiful, to maintain the 75-year-old submarine. So we're just doing everything we can to keep her looking pretty. But the guys would sleep underneath. One of the interesting things about submarines is that we would hot bunk, which meant that there wasn't enough bunks for the crew. So basically, unless you were qualified, and I'll explain that a little bit later, unless you were qualified, you hot bunked, which meant when you were on duty, you were working. When your shipmate went on duty, then you slept in his bunk. We slept on top of what we called a leather flash case. Most of us, it was hot, humid inside here. We didn't use a lot of sheets or nice things like that. We slept on top of the flash sheets, so consequently it was easy for a person to, somebody would get out and somebody would get in the bunk. We even had bunks we call the honeymoon suites. Now you'd have to be a young kid like we all were in our 20s in order to get up here. But some people very much enjoyed sleeping in the forward torpedo room. I slept in the after battery, and I'll show you what that's like.